My husband died on March 9th. Heart attack. He was 58 years old. He was in the driveway shoveling snow, which he had been told not to do, which he had been told specifically and repeatedly not to do for 2 years since his first cardiac event, and which he did anyway because he was Raymond Calloway, and Raymond Calloway did not stand inside and watch someone else handle something he was capable of handling himself. That was who he was. That was exactly who he was. The paramedics came in 8 minutes. 8 minutes is fast. It was not fast enough. I stood in the driveway in my coat and my socks because I hadn't stopped to find shoes, and I watched them work, and I knew before they told me. You know. Some part of you always knows before the words arrive. He and I had been married for 26 years. We had 2 sons, Kevin, who was 24, and Marcus, who was 21. We lived in the house we had bought together 18 years ago, the one with the blue shutters that Raymond had repainted every 4 years, whether they needed it or not. He had an opinion about the color of shutters. He had opinions about a great many things. I will not pretend our marriage was perfect. No marriage is perfect. We had years that were harder than others. We had arguments that went on too long and apologies that came too late, and periods where we were 2 people living parallel lives that happened to share an address. But we had more good years than hard ones. And in the last 5 years, since the first heart attack, since the scare that reminded us both what was at stake, we had been, I think, the best version of ourselves together. I had believed we had time to keep being that. We did not have time. Kevin flew in from Denver. Marcus drove up from school. We arranged the funeral, which took 3 days, and then we held the funeral, which took 1 day, and then we got through the week after, which was harder than any of it because that's when the casseroles stop coming and everyone goes home and you are left alone in a house that is very quiet in a new way. 6 weeks after he died, on a Tuesday afternoon in April, my phone rang. I was in the kitchen. I was doing the ordinary, slightly desperate thing of organizing the pantry because organizing things was something to do with my hands that felt like control. The caller ID said First Federal Bank. I don't bank with First Federal. I have never banked with First Federal. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then something made me answer. A woman introduced herself as Sandra Myers. She said she was a customer service manager. She said she was very sorry for my loss and that she was calling because there was a matter related to my husband's estate that she needed to bring to my attention. She said she had mailed a letter 2 weeks ago but hadn't heard back. I hadn't been opening all the mail. There was a pile on the counter that I was working through slowly. She said, "There is an account at our bank in your husband's name. It has been open for 9 years. As the account holder has passed, there are some procedures we need to follow. Given the circumstances, I thought it best to call directly." I said, "I'm sorry, I think there may be a mistake. We don't have an account with First Federal." She said, "Mrs. Calloway, the account is in your husband's name, Raymond Arthur Calloway. I have his Social Security number on file. I don't believe this is a mistake." There was a pause. She said, "There is also a named beneficiary on the account. I think you should come in." I think this is a conversation better had in person. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone. I said, "How much is in the account?" She said, "I'd really prefer to discuss the details in person." I said, "Sandra, how much is in the account?" A pause. Then, $47,000. I sat down on the floor, not in a chair, on the floor, my back against the cabinet, my phone in my hand, the pantry half reorganized in front of me. $47,000. 9 years. A beneficiary he had named and never mentioned. I called my sister Donna. I said, "I need you to come with me to a bank tomorrow. I'll explain on the way." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the bed that was still too big and too quiet, and I thought about 9 years. 9 years ago, my husband and I were 49 years old, and Kevin was 15, and Marcus was 12, and we were coaching Little League and planning a trip to the Smoky Mountains and worrying about Kevin's grades. 9 years ago, we were just us, just the ordinary middle of an ordinary life. What was he doing 9 years ago that required a separate bank account? What was he doing for 9 years that required $47,000? Who was this beneficiary? I did not let myself finish that thought. I held it at arm's length, and I went to the bank in the morning with my sister, and I sat down across from Sandra Myers, who was a careful, professional woman who had clearly done this before, and I let her explain it to me. The account had been opened 9 years ago. Regular deposits, sometimes monthly, sometimes every few months, varying amounts between $200 and $800. The last deposit had been made in January, 2 months before he died. The named beneficiary was listed as Elijah James Reeves. Date of birth, June 14th, 2016. 8 years old. I looked at the date of birth for a long time. I did the math. 8 years old. Conceived approximately 9 years ago. Account opened 9 years ago. Donna put her hand on my arm. I sat there and I looked at Sandra Myers and I said, "Do you have a contact for the beneficiary? A guardian? A parent?" She said, "The account lists a contact person, a woman named Diane Reeves. She is listed as the boy's mother." I said, "Do you have a phone number?" Sandra looked at me carefully. She said, "Mrs. Calloway, you don't have to do anything today. You can take time. There's no urgency." I said, "I know. Do you have a phone number?" She gave me the number. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot for 22 minutes. Donna sat in the passenger seat and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Donna has always known when to be quiet. It is one of her great gifts. I thought about Raymond. I thought about 26 years. About the hospital waiting rooms and the parent-teacher conferences and the Sunday mornings making pancakes and the long, quiet drives and the arguments and the apologies and the 5 years at the end that were the best years. I thought about the man who shoveled snow because he refused to stand inside and watch someone else handle something he was capable of handling himself. I thought about the fact that he had opened an account 9 years ago and funded it steadily for 9 years and named a child as the beneficiary and never said a word. He had not hidden it perfectly. He had left a name. He had left a number. He had left $47,000 for a boy named Elijah. He knew I would find it. He had to have known. Maybe that was the point. I called the number. A woman answered, cautious, quiet. I said, "My name is Margaret Calloway. I believe you knew my husband. I believe he may have..." I stopped. I said, "I have just come from the bank. I know about the account. I know about Elijah. I'm not calling to cause problems. I just need to understand." The silence on her end was very long. Then she said, "How did you get this number?" I told her. She was quiet again. Then she said, "I didn't know he was going to do that. The account. I didn't know about it until after he died. Someone from the bank called me too." I said, "How old is Elijah?" She said, "He'll be 9 in June." I said, "Does he know about Raymond?" Another pause. She said, "He knows his father's name. He knows his father had another family. He knows his father sent money. He doesn't know his father is gone yet. I haven't been able to—" She stopped. She said, "I haven't found the right words yet." I sat in that car and I thought about a boy named Elijah who was almost 9 years old and who was about to be told that his father was dead. I thought about what that was like. I thought about Marcus at 12, at 21, at whatever age he would be when he eventually pieced this together. I thought about Kevin. I had not called my sons yet. I had not gotten that far. I said, "I'm not going to fight about the money. I want you to know that. I don't know yet what I'm going to do with any of this, but I'm not going to make things harder for your son than they already are." She said, very quietly, "Thank you." I said, "He looks like Raymond, doesn't he?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Yes, he does." I told my sons that night. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten 10,000 meals together, the same table where Raymond had sat at the head and served the potatoes and complained about the football scores. And I told them everything I knew. Kevin was very still. Marcus cried and then got angry and then went quiet in the way he goes quiet when he is working through something too large for the room. Kevin said, "Did you know?" I said, "No." He said, "Are you sure?" I looked at him. I said, "Kevin, I am sure." He nodded. He looked at the table. He said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I don't know yet." What I eventually did 3 months later, after a great deal of silence and grief, and one very long conversation with my sister, and one very long conversation with my pastor, and several weeks of sitting with something that I could not yet name, was this. I called Diane Reeves back. I asked if I could meet Elijah. Not for me, or not only for me, but because Raymond had opened that account and funded it for 9 years and named that boy as the beneficiary. And whatever else that meant, it meant that boy was supposed to have something. And whatever I thought about how that boy came to exist, he existed. He was 8 years old, and his father was dead, and he had Raymond's face. He deserved to know that Raymond had thought about him. Diane said yes. I don't know why she said yes. I think she was as tired as I was of carrying something alone. We met at a park in the middle of the city on a Saturday in July. Elijah was wearing a red shirt. He had Raymond's forehead. He had Raymond's way of holding his chin slightly down when he was thinking about something. He said, "Are you my dad's wife?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you sad that he died?" I said, "Yes, very sad." He thought about that. Then he said, "Me too." We sat on a bench for a while. Diane sat a little way off and watched. Elijah told me about his school and about his best friend and about a book he was reading. He was very serious for 8 years old. He had Raymond's opinions. When it was time to go, he said, "Will you come back?" I looked at Diane. She was watching me with an expression I couldn't entirely read. I said, "I think so. Yes." I don't know what we are. We are not a family in any clean or simple sense. We are people connected by a man who is gone, who left things behind that are complicated, and that we are all trying in our own ways to honor. My sons know about Elijah. Kevin has met him once and is still deciding how he feels. Marcus is not ready yet. That is okay. There is no timeline for this. What I know is that Raymond opened that account when Elijah was born. He funded it every month for 9 years. He named him. He didn't tell me. I may be angry about that for a long time. I am allowed to be angry about that. But he also didn't disappear. He didn't pretend that boy didn't exist. He set something aside for him, quietly, steadily, for 9 years. And then he left a name and a number and $47,000, and he trusted that I would find it. He knew me. He knew what I would do. I am not sure I have forgiven him, but I went back to the park in October. Elijah had a new book. He told me about it the whole afternoon. He has Raymond's opinions. That part, at least, I recognize. Kevin came around in December. I don't know what changed. We didn't talk about it directly. He just called one Sunday afternoon and said, "Mom, do you think Elijah would like a football? He's 8, right?" I don't know what 8-year-olds like. I said, "He likes books, actually. He's a reader." Kevin was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Of course he is. Of course Raymond's kid is a reader." There was something in his voice when he said it, not cruelty, something closer to recognition. Raymond had been a reader too. Quietly, privately, the way he did most things. A book on the nightstand always, never discussed, but always there. Kevin had inherited it. Now apparently Elijah had too. Kevin met him in January. We all went to the park together, the 3 of us, me and Kevin and Marcus, though Marcus stood a bit apart and watched more than he participated, which was his right. Elijah showed up in the same red coat he'd been wearing since July, which Diane told me quietly he refused to change because it was his favorite and she had given up fighting about it. He shook Kevin's hand very solemnly, the way Raymond used to shake hands, firmly, with eye contact, like it meant something. Kevin looked at me over Elijah's head with an expression I recognized. He had seen it too. We stayed for 2 hours. On the way home, Kevin drove and I sat in the passenger seat, and we didn't say much. Then he said, "I'm not okay with what Dad did. I want you to know I'm not excusing it." I said, "I know." He said, "But that kid didn't do anything. That kid is just..." He stopped. He said, "That kid is just a kid." I said, "Yes." He said, "So I'll come back. If you're going, I'll come back." Marcus is slower. Marcus has always processed things slowly, deeply, in rooms by himself where I can't see the work happening. I don't push him. He will arrive where he arrives when he arrives, and I will be there when he does. That is all I can offer. What I did not expect, what I could not have predicted on that Tuesday afternoon when I sat down on my kitchen floor with my back against the cabinet, was how much space Elijah would come to occupy. Not in a way that displaces anything, not in a way that asks me to stop being angry at Raymond, or to stop grieving him, or to stop being sad about the things I didn't know, but in the specific, concrete way that a child occupies space when they are present, loudly, completely, without apology. He calls me Mrs. C. I don't know how that started. He just started doing it at the second visit, and it stuck. Mrs. C. He says it with the particular authority of a child who has decided something and will not be moved. He told me once, we were at the park in February, he was throwing bread at ducks with great seriousness of purpose. He said, "My mom says my dad was a good person. Was he?" I thought about that for a moment. The honest answer was complicated. The honest answer involved 26 years and $47,000 and a secret account and a conversation on a kitchen floor. The honest answer was not something I was going to give to an 8-year-old. I said, "He was a person who tried to do the right thing. He didn't always manage it, but he tried. Elijah threw another piece of bread at the ducks. He said, "That's what my mom says too." He has Raymond's way of considering things. He goes quiet and he thinks, and then he says whatever he has concluded. No preamble, no softening, just the thing. Raymond was like that. I am still angry at Raymond. I am also, separately and at the same time, grateful to him for the way he loved this boy. Quietly, at a distance, in the way he was apparently only capable of, through a bank account, through steady deposits, through the naming of a beneficiary. He could not be present. Whether that was his choice or the situation's constraint, I don't fully know and maybe never will. But he set something aside. He kept setting it aside for 9 years. He thought about Elijah's future in the same systematic, stubborn way he thought about everything. Oil changes, shutter paint, the proper way to shovel a driveway. He took care of his own, in the ways he could manage. I am trying to hold all of that at once, the betrayal and the care, the secret and the $47,000 left behind as a kind of explanation. The man I knew and the man I apparently didn't know, and the ways in which they are the same man. Donna says I'm remarkable. She says she doesn't know how I do it. I don't know how I do it either. I just get up in the morning and I do the next thing. I make coffee. I open the mail. I text my sons. I drive to the park on Saturdays sometimes and sit on a bench while Elijah tells me about whatever he is currently reading with the focused intensity of a child who has found his people. Last month, he was reading a book about ocean animals. He told me, very seriously, that a blue whale's heart is the size of a small car. I said, I didn't know that. He said, most people don't. He sounded so much like Raymond when he said it that I had to look away for a moment. Raymond would have liked him. I think, despite everything, Raymond did like him. I think that is what the account was. I think that is what the deposits were, not just obligation, not just guilt. Something closer to love, expressed in the only way Raymond Calloway knew how to express things he couldn't figure out how to say out loud. Steadily, quietly, over time, in the form of something that could be counted. I have not forgiven him. I want to be honest about that. I do not know if I will. There is a version of this story where I arrive at forgiveness clean and clear and complete, and I don't know if that is where I am going. Maybe I get there. Maybe what I get is something adjacent to forgiveness, an acceptance, a settling, a deciding that the full truth of a person is not negated by their worst secrets. I am working on it. On the last day of February, Elijah turned 9. Diane sent me a photo. He was at a kitchen table with a birthday cake, 9 candles, frosting on his chin. He was looking at the camera with the particular solemn expression he has when something matters to him. I printed the photo and put it on the refrigerator. Kevin saw it when he came for dinner the following week. He stood in front of it for a moment. Then he went and sat down and didn't say anything about it. But he didn't ask me to take it down. That is something. That is, right now, enough.